Captain Hyanwu stared at the massive shape blocking out the stars near Mars. His small patrol ship felt like a toy next to the alien vessel that had appeared without warning 3 hours ago. The thing was huge, bigger than any space station Earth had ever built. Dark metal covered its surface, and strange lights pulsed along its sides like a slow heartbeat. "Sir, we're getting more contacts," said Lieutenant Minho from the communications station. His voice was steady, but Hyanwu could hear the tension underneath. 17 more ships just dropped out of whatever they use for faster travel. They're surrounding the inner planets. Through the view screen, Hyanwu watched as more alien ships appeared like ghosts materializing from nothing. Each one was different in shape, but all carried the same dark, threatening look. Some were long and thin, like spears, others were round with spinning sections. The largest one looked like a massive hammer floating in space. "Any response to our messages?" Hyanwu asked. "Nothing yet, Captain. We've tried every frequency we know. Even sent mathematical sequences and pictures. They're just sitting there." Dr. Soyoung looked up from her science station on Luna Base, her face pale on the communication screen. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. These ships are running on power sources that make our fusion reactors look like campfires. Whatever they are, they're far beyond our technology." Back on Earth, President Lehman was in an emergency meeting with world leaders. The news had spread quickly. Alien ships had arrived, and they weren't answering Earth's attempts to communicate. Every government on the planet was asking the same question: were they friendly or hostile? On his flagship, Admiral Vexstar studied the primitive vessels approaching. His fleet, the small ships, looked fragile, held together with simple metal plates and basic propulsion systems. He had seen thousands of species across the galaxy, and these humans appeared to be among the most backward he had encountered. "Report," Vexstar commanded, his 4 arms working different control panels at once. "The inhabitants call themselves humans," Admiral said Science Officer Kolinth. "They appear to be bipedal mammals, with only 2 sets of limbs. Their technology is crude. They use chemical rockets and simple fusion power. Most curious, they seem to have emotions that affect their decision-making." Vexstar made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. "Emotional mammals? How typical. Do they show the usual submission responses when faced with superior force? That is the strange part. Admiral, they continue to approach our vessels despite the obvious power difference. Their communications suggest they want to talk and negotiate, rather than immediately surrender." This puzzled Vexstar in his 300 years of conquest. Every species immediately recognized the Empire's superiority and begged for mercy. These humans seemed either too stupid to understand their situation or too primitive to recognize danger. Captain Hyanwu's ship was now close enough to see details on the alien vessel's hull. Strange symbols covered the surface, and weapon ports were clearly visible along its length. Whatever these beings were, they had come prepared for war. Suddenly, his communication system crackled to life. A deep voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded like it was being translated by a machine. "Primitive vessel, you will halt your advance and prepare to receive our terms." Hyanwu exchanged glances with his crew. After hours of silence, the aliens were finally talking. "This is Captain Hyanwu of the Earth Defense Force. We welcome you to our solar system and hope we can discuss peaceful relations between our peoples." There was a pause, then what sounded like multiple voices speaking in a harsh, clicking language. When the translation came back, the tone was dismissive. "I am Admiral Vexstar of the Galactic Empire. You will immediately cease your pathetic attempts at diplomacy. Your species is now property of the Empire. You will surrender your weapons and prepare your population for integration as a labor class." The bridge fell silent. Hyanwu felt his stomach drop but kept his voice level. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Admiral. Humanity doesn't belong to anyone. We're willing to discuss trade agreements and cultural exchange, but we won't surrender our freedom." Back on the alien flagship, Overlord Krathvan listened to the translation with amusement. He was Vexstar's superior, a being so ancient that he had personally overseen the conquest of over 200 worlds. These humans were entertaining in their ignorance. "Admiral, show them the consequences of defiance," Krathvan ordered. Vexstar selected a target. A small human space station, orbited between Earth and its moon, probably used for mining or research. A single blast from his ship's main weapon would be sufficient to demonstrate Imperial power. On Luna Base, Dr. Soyoung was monitoring the alien fleet when her instruments went crazy. All ships, massive energy buildup on the largest alien vessel. They're targeting Mining Station 7. Captain Hyanwu watched in horror as a beam of pure energy reached across space in an instant. Mining Station 7, home to 300 people, simply vanished. No explosion, no debris field. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, as if it had never existed. The silence that followed was deafening. "Did that get your attention, little mammals?" Admiral Vexstar's voice came through the speakers. "That was a demonstration. We have weapons that can crack your planet like an egg. You have 30 of your planetary rotations to surrender completely. If you comply, most of your population will be allowed to live as workers. If you resist, we will exterminate you and find a more suitable species to fill your role. Engineer Jin-ho, working on a repair ship near the mining station's former location, was collecting the few pieces of debris that remained. His hands shook as he worked, but not from fear. Something was building inside him, a cold anger that focused his mind like nothing ever had before. Captain, he radioed to Hyun Woo. I'm detecting unusual materials in this debris, metal alloys I've never seen before. If I can analyze these fragments, maybe we can learn something about their technology. President Lehman's voice came over the emergency channel, broadcast to every human ship and station in the system. All units, return to Earth immediately. We need to discuss our response. As the human ships began their journey home, none of them noticed the small probes that had been quietly launched from the alien fleet. The probes were already studying human communications, technology, and behavior patterns. On his flagship, Overlord Krathvin reviewed the initial data with satisfaction. These humans showed the typical emotional responses he expected from primitive mammals. They had families they cared about, which made them weak. They had individual names for their ships and weapons, which showed unhealthy attachment to objects. Most importantly, they seemed to suffer from the delusion that talking could solve problems that only force could resolve. 30 cycles should be more than enough, he told Admiral Vexstar. By then, they'll realize the hopelessness of their situation and surrender, like all the others. Begin preparations for occupation. We'll need labor camps on their major continents and processing centers for their more useful individuals. But as the human ships retreated toward Earth, something the Empire had never encountered before was already beginning. In the space of those few hours, humanity had seen the face of their enemy and learned a terrible lesson. They were not alone in the universe, and they were not welcome in it. The Empire had made their first mistake. They assumed that fear would make humans weak. They had no idea that sometimes, fear makes humans dangerous. 6 months had passed since the Empire's ultimatum, and General Nari stood in the war room deep beneath the Swiss mountains. Maps covered every wall, showing defensive positions across Earth and the outer colonies. Red dots marked where the alien ships had been spotted, slowly moving through human space like predators circling their prey. They're taking their time, said President Lehman, studying the latest intelligence reports. Every week they take another asteroid mining station or research outpost. They're not in any hurry. That's what worries me, Nari replied. They act like they've already won, like this is just cleanup work. Above them, the Empire ships continued their slow advance through the solar system. War Commander Theklos reviewed the latest reports from his scouts with growing amusement. The humans were building what they called defenses around their planet, but to Imperial eyes, they looked like children playing with toys. Look at this, Theklos said to his aide, pointing at images of human ships. They've painted names on their vessels. Defiant, Courage, Hope. They give emotional labels to machines. And see here, they've added decorative symbols. Some even have pictures of Earth animals. The aide, a young officer named Zelkith, leaned in to study the images. Why would they do such things, Commander? It serves no tactical purpose. Because they are emotional creatures, Theklos explained. They form attachments to objects, places, even ideas. This makes them predictable. When we threaten what they are attached to, they will act emotionally rather than logically. In the Empire's capital ship, Overlord Krathvin was receiving reports. From across the galaxy, other species were watching the human situation with interest. The Galactic Empire had broadcast their intention to conquer Earth as a demonstration of imperial power. It would be good entertainment for the subject races. The betting pools are quite active, reported Intelligence Chief Morden. Most species are wagering on how quickly the humans will surrender. The average estimate is 12 more days, and the humans themselves, Krathvin asked. They continue to behave strangely. They are not begging for mercy or trying to flee their system. Instead, they appear to be preparing for conflict. Our analysts believe this is simply denial. They cannot accept the reality of their situation. Back on Earth, Dr. Yoonji worked day and night in her laboratory, studying the fragments that engineer Jin-ho had collected from the destroyed mining station. The alien materials were unlike anything in human science, but she was beginning to understand their structure. The energy patterns are fascinating, she told her research team. Their shields work on a harmonic frequency system. If we can match those frequencies, we might be able to disrupt them. Colonel Tejo was training pilots in new flight techniques at the Mars training facility. The young pilots were learning to fly in ways that broke every rule of traditional space combat. They practiced flying in tight formations, using debris as cover, and coordinating attacks with split-second timing. Remember, Tejo instructed them, you're not just pilots, you're part of a pack. When one of you is in trouble, the whole pack responds. That's how we survived on Earth for thousands of years, and that's how we'll survive now. The Empire's monitoring stations were recording all of this activity, but they interpreted it differently than humans intended. When they saw pilots practicing dangerous maneuvers, they assumed it was desperation. When they observed the rapid construction of defensive platforms, they saw panic rather than preparation. They're wasting resources on impossible defenses, War Commander Theklos reported to his superiors. They've built energy shields that couldn't stop a single Imperial blast. They've positioned weapons platforms that our ships could destroy from beyond their maximum range. It's almost sad to watch, but some things puzzled the Empire's observers. Human communications showed no signs of surrender negotiations or escape planning. Instead, they were sharing technical information freely between their nations. Countries that had been enemies for centuries were now working together as if they were old allies. This cooperation is unusual, noted intelligence officer Xanthi. Most species fracture under pressure. Different groups blame each other and fight for resources, but these humans seem to be growing more united as the threat increases. President Lehman addressed the United Nations for what many thought might be the last time. Representatives from every nation on Earth filled the assembly hall, their faces grim but determined. We've received no response to our diplomatic attempts, Lehman announced. The Empire has made their intentions clear. They see us as animals to be enslaved or destroyed. But we are not animals, we are human beings, and we will not surrender our freedom without a fight. The room erupted in applause, but it wasn't the desperate cheering of a doomed people. It was the sound of a species that had made its choice. On the Empire's flagship, Overlord Krathvin was growing impatient. The 30-day deadline had passed months ago, and still the humans refused to surrender. This was taking longer than any conquest in Imperial history. Perhaps we should demonstrate our power again, suggested Admiral Vexter. Destroy another station or one of their outer colonies. Show them we're serious. No, Krathvin decided. Let them have their moment of defiance. The longer they resist, the more entertaining it will be for our audience. Besides, their preparations are amusing. They're like insects building hills in the path of a flood. The Empire's greatest mistake was assuming that what they saw was all there was to see. They watched human ships patrol their space lanes and saw primitive vessels with chemical propulsion. They observed human defensive positions and saw weak shields and short-range weapons. They listened to human communications and heard emotional speeches about freedom and courage. What they didn't see was the real preparation happening in hidden facilities around the Earth system. They didn't notice the new alloys being developed. In secret laboratories, they didn't understand that human pilots were training for something no other species had ever attempted. Engineer Jinho had been working with Dr. Yunji's team, combining alien technology with human engineering in ways that should have been impossible. They were creating hybrid systems that the Empire's computers couldn't analyze because they had never been designed before. The beauty of it, Jinho explained to his team, is that we're not trying to copy their technology. We're taking their principles and applying them in ways they never thought of. They've been building the same ships for thousands of years. We're inventing new ones every day. Commander Wujin was developing psychological warfare techniques based on human studies of their own history. He knew that the Empire's rigid hierarchy was both a strength and a weakness. If they could disrupt the command structure, the entire fleet might become confused. They think in terms of orders and obedience, Wu Jin told his intelligence team. But humans think in terms of initiative and adaptation. That's going to be our advantage. The Empire's monitoring stations continued to record human activity, but they filed most of it under primitive panic responses. They saw increased industrial production and assumed it was desperation. They observed military exercises and classified them as futile preparation rituals. They never imagined that humanity's greatest strength was something they couldn't measure or understand. Humans didn't just adapt to new situations. They turned new situations into opportunities. They didn't just survive challenges. They used challenges to become stronger. As the Empire prepared for what they assumed would be an easy victory, they were actually giving humanity the most valuable gift possible: time to prepare for war. The attack began at dawn on Earth, though in space there was no dawn or night. Admiral Ji-hoon watched from the bridge of his flagship as thousands of Imperial ships moved toward Earth like a dark tide. The enemy fleet was so large it blocked out entire sections of stars. All defensive positions. This is Admiral Ji-hoon. He spoke into his communications device. Remember, you're training. Remember what we're fighting for. Today, we show them what humans can do. War Commander Theklos stood on his command deck, confident that this would be over quickly. His fleet carried enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. These primitive humans with their emotional attachments would break at the first sign of real violence. Begin with their outer defenses, Theklos ordered. Destroy their orbital platforms slowly. Let them watch their defenses crumble. Fear will do most of our work for us. The first Imperial weapons fired, sending beams of energy toward human defensive stations. But something unexpected happened. The human shields didn't collapse immediately. Instead, they flickered and shifted, absorbing more damage than should have been possible. Interesting, muttered Science Officer Kalanth. Their shield harmonics are changing in real time. How are they doing that? Captain Minsu commanded the defensive platform designated Hope Station. When the Imperial beams struck his shields, he felt the platform shake, but it held. Dr. Yunji's modifications were working better than anyone had dared hope. All stations. This is Minsu. Their weapons are powerful but predictable. Rotate shield frequencies on my mark. Let's show them some human creativity. Across the human defensive line, shield frequencies shifted in coordinated patterns. The Imperial weapons, designed to overwhelm static defenses, suddenly became less effective. What should have been a quick destruction was turning into a prolonged battle. On the Imperial flagship, Overlord Kraftvan frowned at the tactical displays. Why are their defenses still active? Our weapons should have broken through by now. Their technology appears to be adapting. Overlord, reported Admiral Vexstar, but this is impossible. Primitive species don't have adaptive systems. Then they're not as primitive as we thought, Kraftvan said coldly. Increase firepower. Crush them. Lieutenant Erin worked frantically at her engineering station on Hope Station as Imperial fire intensified. The shields were holding, but barely. She had an idea that was either brilliant or insane. Captain Minsu, what if we don't just defend? What if we turn our shield generators into weapons? Explain quickly, Minsu replied, ducking as another blast shook the station. If I reverse the harmonic frequency and overload the generators, we can create an energy pulse that might damage their ships. It'll destroy our shields, but it might give us a chance. Minsu looked around at his crew. These people had families on Earth. They had everything to lose. But he saw no fear in their faces, only determination. Do it, he ordered. Erin's fingers flew over her controls. The shield generators whined as they reversed their polarity. Energy that had been protecting the station suddenly became a weapon. A massive pulse of power erupted outward, striking 3 Imperial ships. The alien vessels, designed to attack from a safe distance, were not prepared for a defensive station to suddenly become offensive. Their shields flickered and failed. 2 ships lost power completely, drifting helplessly in space. Impossible, War Commander Theklos stared at his displays. Defensive stations cannot attack. It violates basic military doctrine. Sir, his aide reported nervously. The humans appear to be modifying their equipment during battle. They're changing the function of their systems in real time. This was something the Empire had never encountered. Species either had offensive or defensive capabilities, not both. They certainly didn't redesign their technology in the middle of a fight. Sergeant Dongsu commanded a small patrol ship near Earth's moon when he received an emergency signal. A transport ship carrying civilian evacuees from Luna Base was under attack by Imperial fighters. The transport had no weapons and couldn't escape. This is Sergeant Dongsu, to all nearby units. Transport ship Rising Dawn needs immediate assistance. Who's with me? This is Lieutenant Parko. I'm coming. This is Ensign Yuri, on my way. This is Captain Sujin. We're all coming. Within minutes, 12 human fighters had converged on the Imperial attack group. The aliens had expected to destroy an unarmed transport, Isley. Instead, they found themselves fighting humans who flew like they had nothing to lose. Dongsu's ship took heavy damage as he positioned himself between the Imperial fighters and the transport. His engines were failing and his weapons were nearly depleted, but he didn't retreat. Rising Dawn, this is Dongsu. Get those civilians to safety. We'll hold them here. Dongsu, your ship is falling apart. Get out of there, came the reply. Not happening. These people need to get home to their families. Intelligence Officer Xanthi watched the battle from the Imperial command ship with growing unease. The human pilots were behaving in ways that defied logic. They were taking extreme risks to protect ships they had never seen before, crewed by people they had never met. This makes no sense, Xanthi reported to his superiors. These pilots are endangering themselves for strangers. In most species, survival instinct overrides group loyalty, but these humans seem to have stronger loyalty to their species than to their own lives. The transport Rising Dawn escaped, but at a terrible cost. Half the human fighters had been destroyed, including Dongsu's ship, but the surviving pilots didn't retreat. Instead, they regrouped and continued fighting with even greater intensity. They're getting more dangerous, not less, observed Science Officer Kolinth. When we kill some of them, the others don't break formation or flee. They become more aggressive. Captain Minsu's Hope Station was finally overwhelmed by Imperial fire. As the station began to break apart, he opened communications to all human forces. This is Hope Station. We're going down, but we took 6 of theirs with us. Remember, every ship we destroy is one less threatening Earth. Make them pay for every inch. The station exploded in a brilliant flash, but its destruction had an unexpected effect. Instead of demoralizing the human forces, it seemed to energize them. Ships across the defensive line began fighting with desperate creativity. Major Kyung-ho led a squadron of fighters in an attack pattern that no Imperial computer could predict. His ships moved in tight formations, covering each other's blind spots and sharing targeting data in real time. When one ship was damaged, the others immediately adjusted to protect it. They're not fighting like individuals, War Commander Theklos observed with growing alarm. They're fighting like a single organism with multiple parts. How is this possible? Dr. Sunhee worked in her laboratory on Earth, even as the battle raged overhead. She had developed something that might change everything, a virus that could infect Imperial computer systems. It was based on their own technology, turned against them. If we can upload this to their networks, she explained to General Nari, their ships might start receiving false orders or lose communication with each other. How do we get close enough to upload it? We don't. We make them come to us. Commander Woojin had been waiting for this moment. His team had prepared something special. Fake distress signals that would lure Imperial ships into range. But these weren't ordinary traps. They were designed to exploit the Empire's rigid thinking. Imperial ships respond to distress calls in predictable patterns. Woojin explained to his team. They always send the same type of rescue ships. Always follow the same approach routes. We're going to use their efficiency against them. As the battle continued, the Empire began to realize they were not fighting the enemy they had expected. These humans didn't surrender when faced with superior force. They didn't panic when their defenses were breached. Instead, they adapted, improvised, and kept fighting even when logic said they should give up. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to become more united and more dangerous the more pressure was applied to them. Every destroyed human ship made the survivors fight harder. Every Imperial victory seemed to strengthen human resolve rather than break it. War Commander Theklos sent an urgent message to the High Command. Request immediate reinforcements. The humans are not behaving according to any known patterns. They may be more dangerous than initially assessed, but it was already too late for such warnings. Humanity had revealed its true nature, and the Empire was beginning to understand that. They had made a terrible mistake. Major Kung Ho floated in the wreckage of his fighter ship, watching Imperial vessels pass by his hiding spot. His ship was dead, but his suit still had power, and his mind was working perfectly. 3 Imperial cruisers moved in formation toward Earth's, confident they had cleared this area of human resistance. They were wrong. Kyongo activated his emergency beacon, but not to call for rescue. Instead, he sent a coded message to the asteroid mining facility hidden behind the debris field. Within minutes, chunks of rock that had been floating peacefully in space suddenly came alive with engines and weapons. "This is Mining Station Defiance," came a voice over his radio. "We see you, Major, hold tight." The Imperial ships had no idea they were flying into an ambush. The asteroids looked like natural debris, but they were actually converted mining platforms, loaded with human crews and improvised weapons. Engineer Bioram had spent months turning space rocks into weapons of war. "Remember," Bioram told her crews, "we only get one surprise attack. Make it count." The asteroids opened fire at point-blank range. The Imperial ships, designed to fight other warships at long distance, were not prepared for enemies hiding inside what looked like harmless rocks. 2 cruisers exploded immediately. The third tried to retreat but found its path blocked by more asteroids that had moved to surround it. War Commander Theklos watched the tactical display with growing horror. How are they doing this? Asteroids cannot move on their own. Rocks cannot shoot weapons. "Sir," his aide reported, voice shaking, "our scouts missed it completely. The humans have been converting asteroid mining equipment into mobile weapons platforms. They're using civilian technology for military purposes." "That's impossible. Civilian equipment cannot be military equipment. They serve different functions." The humans appear to disagree. "Sir, Dr. Sunhee's computer virus had finally found its target, an Imperial scout ship. Investigating what appeared to be a damaged human communications satellite, made the mistake of scanning it with active sensors. The virus jumped from the satellite to the scout ship's systems like a living thing. Within hours, the virus had spread through the Imperial communication network. Ships began receiving contradictory orders. Some were told to advance when they should retreat. Others were ordered to fire on their own allies. The rigid Imperial hierarchy, which had been their strength, became their weakness as false commands created chaos. "Admiral Vextar, we're getting reports of system failures across the fleet," reported Communications Officer Zell. "Ships are losing contact with command. Some vessels are reporting orders that make no tactical sense. Check all systems for contamination," Vextar ordered. "The humans must have found a way to interfere with our computers." Commander Woojin smiled as he watched Imperial ships drift out of formation. The psychological warfare was working better than he had hoped. But the real test was yet to come. "Begin Phase 2, he told his team. "It's time to show them what fear looks like." Captain Youngmi led a small flotilla of human ships toward the Imperial supply convoy that was heading for Earth. Intelligence reports showed the convoy carried ammunition and spare parts that the enemy fleet desperately needed. If she could destroy it, the Imperial ships would be forced to retreat or fight with limited resources. But Youngmi had a better idea than simply destroying the convoy. She was going to capture it. "All ships, remember the plan," she radioed to her squadron. "We don't just want to stop this convoy, We want to learn from it. Every Imperial ship we capture is a chance to understand their technology better. The convoy escort expected a head-on attack from desperate human defenders. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. Young Mi had used the debris from earlier battles as cover, hiding her ships among the wreckage until the perfect moment. Imperial convoy. This is Captain Young Mi of Earth Defense. Surrender your ships, and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Resist, and we will take them anyway. The Imperial escort commander was confused. In 300 years of conquest, no primitive species had ever demanded the surrender of Imperial forces. It was supposed to work the other way around. You dare demand our surrender. We are the Galactic Empire. We do not surrender to prey animals. Then you've just learned something new, Young Mi replied. The battle was brief, but decisive. Human ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible for individual vessels. They shared targeting data, covered each other's approaches, and adapted their tactics moment by moment. The Imperial escorts, trained to fight by established doctrine, could not cope with enemies who invented new strategies during combat. Colonel Jae-sung received the news of Young Mi's victory while he was planning the defense of Luna Base. The captured Imperial ships were already being studied by human engineers, who were learning to reverse engineer alien technology at an incredible pace. How long before we can use their own weapons against them? Jae-sung asked Engineer Jinho. Give me 3 days. Jinho replied, maybe less. These Imperial ships are built for durability, not security. Their own systems are teaching us how to beat them. On the Imperial flagship, Overlord Krathvan was beginning to understand that something had gone very wrong with his conquest. Species were supposed to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They were supposed to break under pressure, not become more dangerous. How many ships have we lost? He asked his staff. 47 vessels destroyed, 12 captured, and 6 ships missing and presumed lost. Admiral Vexstar reported. The humans are not fighting like any species we've encountered before. Explain. They use civilian equipment as military hardware. They modify their ships during battle. They capture our vessels instead of just destroying them. Most disturbing, they seem to learn our tactics faster than we can change them. Intelligence Chief Morden added his own troubling observations. They're also sharing information instantly across their entire fleet. When one human ship learns something new, all human ships know it within minutes. It's as if their entire species is connected by some kind of shared intelligence. Pilot Xianho had been flying combat missions for 6 months, and he had learned something that terrified the Imperial forces. Human pilots didn't just fly their ships. They treated their ships as extensions of their own bodies. They flew with an intuition and creativity that no Imperial computer could predict. This is Xianho to all pilots. He radioed during a particularly dangerous mission. Remember, your ship isn't just a machine, it's part of you. Fly like your life depends on it, because it does. And fly like Earth's life depends on it, because it does too. The Imperial forces were beginning to realize that they weren't just fighting human ships. They were fighting human will, human creativity, and human refusal to accept defeat. Every battle taught the humans something new, while the Empire's rigid thinking prevented them from adapting quickly enough. Lieutenant Parkman, flying a captured Imperial fighter that had been modified with human technology, led an attack on an Imperial command ship. The enemy couldn't understand how their own vessel could be turned against them so effectively. The humans are using our own technology better than we do, War Commander Theklos reported in desperation. They're improving our designs and using them in ways we never considered. As the months passed, it became clear that the tide of war was turning. What had started as an easy conquest was becoming a nightmare for the Galactic Empire. They had expected to face primitive animals who would surrender quickly. Instead, they had awakened something that grew stronger with every battle. The Empire was learning too late that humanity's greatest weapon was not any ship or technology. It was their refusal to accept that defeat was inevitable, and their ability to turn every setback into an opportunity to become more dangerous. Admiral Korvex arrived with the Empire's reserve fleets, bringing weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. He had conquered 47 worlds personally and had never failed to bring a species to submission. These humans would learn what real Imperial power looked like. War Commander Theklos, Korvex said as he reviewed the battle reports. Your performance has been disappointing. How have primitive mammals held out against the Empire's finest for over a year? Admiral, they are not what they appear to be, Theklos replied carefully. These humans fight with methods we've never encountered. They turn civilian equipment into weapons. They capture our ships and improve our own technology. They coordinate across vast distances without central command. Excuses, Korvex said coldly. I have brought the Planet Cracker Fleet. We will demonstrate what happens to species that refuse Imperial generosity. Colonel Jae-sung stood on the surface of Luna Base, watching through the dome as massive new Imperial ships took positions around Earth. These vessels were different from the others. They were larger, darker, and covered with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Sir, reported Lieutenant Ho Jung, we're detecting energy signatures that are off our scales. Those ships carry enough firepower to destroy Earth's crust. Then we'd better make sure they don't get the chance to use it. Jae-sung replied. Dr. Ye Un-woo had been working on humanity's most desperate project, ships that could keep fighting even after they were destroyed. Using technology learned from captured Imperial vessels, combined with human engineering ingenuity, she had created something that shouldn't exist. The key, she explained to her team, is redundancy beyond anything the Empire can imagine. Multiple command centers, backup systems for the backup systems, and crews trained to keep fighting even when their ship is coming apart around them. Engineer BRM watched the test of their latest creation, a human cruiser that had been designed to function even while being torn to pieces. The ship could lose entire sections and still maintain weapons, shields, and life support in the remaining parts. It's like a living thing, BRM said with amazement. Cut off one part and the others adapt to compensate. The Imperial forces had never seen anything like it. When they destroyed part of a human ship, the rest of the vessel continued fighting. When they thought they had won a battle, human ships that should have been dead suddenly came back to life with different weapons and new tactics. Pilot Xianho had become something of a legend among both human and Imperial forces. He flew ships that shouldn't be able to fly, survived battles that should have been impossible to survive, and had developed a reputation for ramming attacks that terrified enemy pilots. This is Xianho to Imperial forces, he radioed during one particularly intense battle. You want to see what crazy looks like? Watch this. His fighter, already heavily damaged and leaking atmosphere, accelerated directly toward an Imperial battleship. The enemy expected him to veer off at the last second. Instead, Xianho aimed for the ship's main weapon port and flew straight into it at maximum speed. The explosion destroyed both ships, but it also disabled the Imperial vessel's main gun, saving 3 human ships that had been about to be destroyed. Intelligence. Chief Yulthek reported to Overlord Kraftman with increasing desperation. The humans are treating their own deaths as weapons. Overlord, they sacrifice themselves not out of desperation, but as calculated tactical decisions. We've never encountered anything like this. You're telling me they use suicide as a military strategy? Kraftman asked. Not suicide as we understand it. They die to achieve specific objectives. They trade their lives for strategic advantages. It's as if death is just another tool in their arsenal. What terrified the Empire most was realizing that human resistance was growing stronger, not weaker. Each Imperial victory cost them more than the previous one. Each human defeat taught the survivors new lessons. The longer the war continued, the more dangerous humanity became. Captain Minjone led the first human counterattack beyond the solar system. His fleet was small but consisted entirely of ships that had been rebuilt. Using captured Imperial technology, they moved faster than Imperial ships, hit harder than Imperial weapons, and used tactics that no Imperial computer could predict. Target their supply lines, Minjune ordered his captains. Every ship they can't repair is one less ship threatening Earth. Every base we destroy is a victory for every human who ever lived. The attack on Imperial Supply Base 7 was humanity's first victory outside their own solar system. Minchun's ships appeared without warning, struck with devastating effectiveness, and disappeared before Imperial reinforcements could arrive. But they didn't just destroy the base. They captured it, converted it to human use, and began using Imperial supplies to build more human ships. The Empire was being forced to supply their own enemies. Commander Hanbai had spent months studying Imperial tactics, and she had discovered something important. The Empire fought the same way against every enemy. They had a standard approach that had worked for thousands of years across hundreds of worlds. The problem is, she explained to her staff, they assume every species will respond the same way to the same pressure. But humans don't follow their pattern. We respond to pressure by becoming more creative, not more predictable. Hanbai developed what became known as the adaptation protocol. Human forces would deliberately change their tactics every few days. Not because the old tactics weren't working, but to prevent the Empire from learning to counter them. Never let them think they understand us, became the human motto. The moment they think they know what we'll do next, we do something completely different. The psychological effect on Imperial forces was devastating. They were trained to fight enemies who followed predictable patterns. Humans followed no patterns at all. Every battle was different. Every encounter brought new surprises. Admiral Corvex found himself facing something he had never experienced in centuries of conquest. An enemy that learned faster than he did. Every tactic he tried, humans found a counter for within days. Every advantage he gained, they turned into a disadvantage somehow. They're not just fighting us, he reported to the High Command. They're studying us, learning from us, and becoming better at war than we are. How is this possible? Captain Sujin provided part of the answer during a battle near Jupiter. Her ship was surrounded by 5 Imperial cruisers, clearly outgunned and outnumbered. Instead of surrendering or trying to escape, she did something unexpected. Imperial ships, This is Captain Sujin. I want to make you an offer. Surrender now, and we'll let you live. Keep fighting, and you'll find out why humans are called the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The Imperial captains laughed at what they thought was desperate bravado. Then Sujin's ship split apart, revealing that it wasn't one vessel, but 5 smaller ships that had been connected together. Each small ship was faster and more maneuverable than anything the Empire had, and they were all armed with weapons reverse-engineered from captured Imperial technology. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, 3 Imperial ships had been captured and 2 had been destroyed. Sujin hadn't lost a single vessel. "They're not just adapting our technology," War Commander Theklos reported in horror. "They're improving it and using it better than we ever did. They're turning our own strengths against us." The Empire was beginning to understand that they had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that primitive meant weak, that emotional meant vulnerable, and that isolated meant helpless. Instead, they had discovered that humanity's primitive nature made them unpredictable. Their emotions made them willing to take risks no logical species would consider. And their isolation had forced them to become completely self-reliant. The Empire was no longer fighting for conquest. They were fighting for survival against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger and more dangerous. With every passing day, Supreme Admiral Corvex brought the Empire's most powerful weapon to the Sol system, the World Ender, a ship the size of a small moon with enough firepower to shatter planets. It was the Empire's final answer to species that refused to surrender. But as he approached Earth, he found something that made his blood run cold. The humans were no longer just defending, they were advancing. General Sujin commanded a fleet of ships that shouldn't exist. They were built using Imperial technology that had been captured, studied, and improved by human engineers. But more than that, they were crewed by humans who no longer feared the Empire. They had learned to fight, and now they were teaching the galaxy what human warfare looked like. "All ships, this is General Sujin," she broadcast to her fleet as they moved toward the approaching Imperial Armada. "Today we're not just defending Earth. Today we're showing the galaxy that humanity will not be pushed around by anyone." Dr. Yan Wu's latest creation was something the Empire had never imagined possible. A human ship that could repair itself during battle using nanomachines based on Imperial medical technology. The ship didn't just survive damage, it learned from it and became stronger. "Watch this," she told her engineering team as they observed the test. A human cruiser took a direct hit from an Imperial plasma cannon, the kind of weapon that should have destroyed it completely. Instead, the ship's hull flowed like liquid metal, sealing the breach and reinforcing the damaged area. Then analyze the damage, figure out what caused it, and make the ship resistant to that type of attack, Yan Wu explained. "Every time they hurt us, we become harder to hurt." Commander Hanbai had achieved something that terrified Imperial strategists. She had successfully invaded Imperial space. Her fleet had taken control of 3 star systems that had been under Imperial rule for centuries. But what scared the Empire wasn't that humans could conquer their territory. It was how they treated it afterward. "They're not enslaving the populations," Intelligence Chief Morden reported to the High Command. "They're not stealing resources or destroying infrastructure. They're actually improving the lives of species that were under our control." "That's impossible," said Overlord Krathvan. "Conquerors take what they want and leave. That's how conquest works." The humans appeared to disagree. "Overlord, they're building schools, hospitals, and trade centers. They're treating conquered populations better than we ever did." This was perhaps the most terrifying news the Empire could receive. If word spread that human conquest was preferable to Imperial rule, entire sectors might rebel. Captain Minken's reputation had grown beyond Earth's solar system. Imperial pilots spoke his name in whispers, and some refused to engage human ships if they thought he might be commanding them. He had become something the Empire had never faced before, a human legend that inspired fear in their enemies and hope in their allies. "This is Captain Minjun to all Imperial forces in the Centauri system," he broadcast during one of his raids. "You have one chance to surrender. We know you're just following orders, and we're willing to treat you fairly. If you give up now, but if you keep fighting, we'll show you why the Empire should have left humanity alone." Most Imperial captains ignored such offers, considering them signs of human weakness. They were wrong. Minchon's reputation for keeping his word had spread throughout Imperial ranks. When he offered mercy, he meant it. When he promised destruction, he delivered that too. The battle for Centauri base was over in 4 hours. 3 Imperial fleets had been destroyed. 2 had surrendered, and the base itself had been captured intact. Minchun's forces hadn't lost a single ship. Admiral Corvex watched the tactical reports with growing horror. How is one human captain defeating entire fleets? What kind of tactics is he using? "That's the problem, Admiral," his aide replied nervously. "He's not using any tactics we can identify. Every battle is completely different. He seems to invent new strategies for each encounter." The truth was that Minjun represented something uniquely human, the ability to think creatively under pressure. While Imperial forces followed established doctrine, Human commanders treated every battle as a puzzle to be solved in a new way. Dr. Insu had been working on humanity's most ambitious project, ships that could think for themselves. Using artificial intelligence based on human brain patterns, combined with imperial computer technology, she had created vessels that could adapt and learn during combat. They're not just ships, she explained to President Lehman. They're partners. They learn from their human crews and develop their own tactical preferences. Every ship becomes unique, with its own fighting style. The Imperial forces found themselves facing something they couldn't prepare for: human ships that changed their behavior patterns constantly. As if each vessel had its own personality. Engineer Cell GI had solved the problem of Imperial numerical superiority in a typically human way. She had figured out how to make one human ship do the work of 10 Imperial vessels. Her designs used modular construction, allowing ships to separate into multiple units or combine into larger ones as needed. Flexibility is our advantage, she told her construction teams. Imperial ships are built for one purpose each. Our ships can be fighters, bombers, transports, or command vessels depending on what we need at the moment. The psychological effect on Imperial forces was devastating. They never knew if they were fighting one large human ship or 10 small ones until the battle was already underway. Ambassador the Jinn had achieved something that shocked the entire galaxy. She had convinced 3 Imperial client species to switch sides and join humanity. The Cathari, the Vilmanot, and the Zarathan had all declared independence from the Empire and requested human protection. Why would they do this? Demanded Overlord Krathvan. We've ruled them for centuries. We provide them with protection and guidance. According to their messages, reported Diplomatic Officer Tinge, they prefer human leadership because humans treat them as equals rather than subjects. They say humans ask for their help instead of demanding their obedience. This was the Empire's worst nightmare. If their client species began to defect to humanity, the Empire would lose not just this war, but their entire galactic domain. Colonel Tejo had trained a new generation of human pilots who fought like nothing the Empire had ever seen. They flew in formations that looked random but were actually precisely coordinated. They used tactics that seemed insane but were carefully calculated. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to enjoy combat. Imperial pilots fight because they have to, Tejo explained to his students. You fight because you choose to. That makes you more dangerous than they can imagine. The Empire's pilots were beginning to refuse combat missions. Reports spoke of human pilots who laughed during battle, who sang songs while fighting, who treated warfare like a deadly game they were determined to win. Supreme Admiral Corvex, finally, decided to use the World Ender's main weapon, a beam that could destroy entire planets. He targeted Earth itself, intending to end the war with one devastating blow, but when he gave the order to fire, nothing happened. Sir, his weapons officer reported in panic. The main gun is not responding. Something is interfering with our targeting systems. Captain Wujin smiled from his position aboard a small human ship that had attached itself to the World Ender's hull like a parasite. His team had spent weeks getting close enough to plant Dr. Sunhee's computer virus directly into the massive ship's systems. This is Captain Wujin to the World Ender. He broadcast, your planet-killing weapon belongs to us now. Surrender your ship, or we'll use your own gun to destroy your fleet. The Empire's ultimate weapon had been turned against them by a single human captain and a computer virus. It was the perfect symbol of how completely the war had changed. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Empire was beginning to understand that they were no longer fighting for conquest. They were fighting for their very survival against an enemy that had learned to be better at war than the warriors who had taught them. The war ended not with a massive battle, but with a simple transmission. Overlord Prime Velkoth, supreme ruler of the Galactic Empire, sent a message to Earth that no one in the galaxy had ever expected to hear: the Empire's unconditional surrender. President Sungho read the surrender document in the same room where humanity had first decided to resist the Empire's demands 2 years earlier. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The species that had been dismissed as primitive animals was now accepting the surrender of the most powerful force in the galaxy. The Galactic Empire formally surrenders all claims to human territory and recognizes humanity as a sovereign species. Sungho read aloud. Furthermore, the Empire agrees to the immediate release of all conquered species and the dissolution of all forced labor arrangements. Captain Hojung commanded the Honor Guard as Overlord Prime Velkoth's shuttle landed on Earth. The alien leader, who had once ruled over 800 species across thousands of worlds, now came as a defeated supplicant seeking mercy from the humans he had tried to enslave. Velkoth was surprised by what he found. Instead of the revenge he expected, he was greeted with the same formal courtesy that Ertz offered to any diplomatic visitor. Human guards were present but not threatening. The meeting room was comfortable and well-appointed. Most shocking of all, he was offered food and medical attention for his injuries. Why? Velkoth asked President Sungho during their first meeting. We tried to destroy you. We killed your people. We would have enslaved your entire species. Why are you treating us with kindness? Because, Sung-ho replied simply, that's what humans do. We fight when we have to, but we prefer to build rather than destroy. Dr. Insu was already working with former empirical scientists to address the medical crisis that was spreading through imperial space. Centuries of conquest had left many species weakened by disease and malnutrition. Human medical technology, enhanced with captured imperial knowledge, was being freely shared with anyone who needed it. We estimate we can save approximately 2 billion lives in the first year alone, Insu reported to the Earth Council. The Empire's former subjects have been living under conditions that we would consider inhumane, but they're treatable conditions. Engineer Selji led the effort to convert Imperial warships into exploration and transport vessels. The massive fleets that had once terrorized the galaxy were being transformed into tools for peaceful expansion and trade. It's actually easier than building new ships, she explained to her teams. Imperial vessels are overbuilt for military purposes. Remove the weapons, add scientific equipment and comfortable living spaces, and you have excellent exploration ships. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity did something no conquering species had ever done before. Instead of ruling through fear, they immediately began helping their former enemies rebuild their societies. Ambassador the Jin established the Galactic Cooperation Council, a new organization designed to replace the Empire's authoritarian rule with voluntary cooperation between species. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came to Earth to participate in something unprecedented, a galactic government based on consent rather than conquest. Every species gets an equal voice, the Jin explained to the assembled delegates. Decisions are made by consensus when possible, by majority vote when necessary. No species rules over another. No species is forced to participate against their will. Former Empire Admiral Thenex found himself working alongside Captain Minjun to establish new trade routes that would benefit all species equally. The same human who had once been his most feared enemy was now his partner in building a better galaxy. I don't understand humans, Thenex admitted during one of their planning sessions. You defeated us completely. You could rule us the way we ruled others, why don't you? Because ruling people who don't want to be ruled is exhausting, Minjun replied with a smile. It's much easier to work with willing partners than to force unwilling subjects to obey. Captain Wu Jin led joint human-alien exploration missions to parts of the galaxy that had been off-limits during Imperial rule. These expeditions discovered new worlds, new species, and new possibilities for cooperation that the Empire's rigid hierarchy had never allowed. The Empire controlled through fear, Wu Jin explained to his mixed crews, but fear makes people hide their best ideas. When people feel safe to speak freely, amazing things happen. Colonel Jae-soon established the Galactic Defense Force, a voluntary military organization designed to protect all species from external threats. Unlike the Imperial forces, which existed to conquer and control, the GDF was created to defend and preserve. We learned something during the war, Jae-sung told the first graduating class of GDF officers, which included humans and aliens working together. The best way to stay safe is to make sure everyone else is safe too. Dr. Yan Wu's research had revolutionized both medicine and engineering throughout the galaxy. Technologies that the Empire had kept secret for centuries were now being shared freely, leading to advances that benefited everyone. Knowledge belongs to everyone, she said during a lecture at the new Galactic University. The Empire hoarded information to maintain power. We share it to create opportunity. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some Imperial loyalists attempted to restart the war, but they found little support, even among their own people. Most former Imperial citizens were discovering that life under human influence was better than life under Imperial rule. General Su Jin, now head of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, dealt with these remnants firmly but fairly. Former Imperial soldiers who laid down their weapons were offered new careers in exploration, construction, or defense. Those who continued to fight were defeated quickly by forces that now included many of their former comrades. The old empire is dead, Su Jin announced after the last Imperial holdout surrendered. But that doesn't mean the people who served it are our enemies. They're our future partners, if they choose to be. President Sung-ho addressed the galaxy on the second anniversary of the Empire's surrender. His speech was broadcast to hundreds of worlds and translated into thousands of languages. 2 years ago, the Empire made what they called a fatal error. He said, they underestimated humanity's power, but they were wrong about what our power really is. Our power isn't our weapons, or our ships, or our technology. Our power is our belief that every species deserves to be free, and our willingness to work together to make that freedom possible. Former Overlord Prime Velkoth, now serving as a senior advisor to the Galactic Cooperation Council, reflected on the changes he had witnessed. The galaxy was more prosperous, more peaceful, and more innovative than it had ever been under Imperial rule. The Empire's fatal error, he wrote in his memoirs, was not underestimating human military power. It was failing to understand that humans don't fight for conquest or domination. They fight for the right to help others become better than they are. and once the fighting is over, that's exactly what they do. The new galactic order was built on principles that the Empire had never understood: cooperation instead of domination, partnership instead of subjugation, and the radical idea that former enemies could become trusted allies. Humanity had not just won a war. They had won the right to reshape the galaxy according to their values of freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect. The species that had once been dismissed as emotional animals had become the teachers of a new way of living. Among the stars, the Empire's fatal error had been complete. But from that error, something beautiful had grown, a galaxy where every species could reach for the stars together, as equals and as friends.